for being here.
Sure.
We were talking earlier, and you mentioned that payments were the last Google-like problem to solve. I find that really intriguing. Tell me what you mean by that.
Sure. I guess it seems somewhat surprising, but if you actually go talk to any business operating online at any scale, the literal act of accepting money from their customers is one of the biggest issues they have to deal with. Whether it's people paying on a phone and being unable to check out, or cross-border issues where they're in America and they've no way to accept payments from people in China or South Africa or Pakistan. This is, these businesses will tell you it's really holding their business back. And the places where businesses can finally crack it, I think Airbnb have done a phenomenal job of internationalizing. They've seen phenomenal success, and the places where they can't, it really hurts them.
How long does it take for it to become obvious who the Google is in this space, in the payment space?
I think the interesting thing that Google did is they started with the technical foundation. It's actually kind of fun to look back on the Internet archives and see what the state of the land looked like in kind of 1999.
Have you done that?
Or 2000. Yeah. It's fun spelunking. And the interesting thing is, everyone was obsessed with building a portal, right? You had Lycos building their portal, you had Alta Vista building their portal, and Google actually started by laying a really good technical foundation. You have to start by indexing the entire web, assigning relevant scores to it with PageRank, and then you can go about, building a really good search and a really good homepage for people. But you can't skip all those early stages of building the technical foundation. You can't jump straight to building the portal.
Right.
And so, I think it's too early to call how the online payments landscape will play out. But I think one thing that is interesting to note is it feels really fragmented and really brittle. You have all these different payment systems that don't work together very well. You have businesses having to solve the same problems for themselves over and over and over. And I think whichever companies end up succeeding here will start by building a really good technical foundation and then building the user-facing product on top of that.
Okay, that's an interesting point though. But it's going to be, we're years out from seeing who the winner is, do you think?
We're a long way away, but it's worth remembering that the internet is still pretty young, in that the internet itself has been around for close to 40 years, but the web is 20, 22 years old. Even for a long time there, the web was only accessible through desktop computers available sitting in our home or office. It's been only about 10 years since people have had smartphones and the internet with them in their pocket at all times. And so of course, it's reasonable that we haven't figured out how commerce should work in this world. But 20 years from now, I would be very surprised if it's still as broken as it is today.
So, but 5 years out. So, in the medium term, what is the consensus at Stripe, and what's your view on what commerce is going to look like?
Sure. There are two big problems. One is international, like we talked about. The idea that if you are a business in, Ireland or the United States or Norway, and you want to simply, you have a product that's really good, you now want to, you want to turn it into a business and you want to accept payments from people around the world, that is still an unsolved problem. And specifically, it's unsolved because, the internet relies on credit cards, and many of the geographies that are coming online do not have any significant credit card penetration. And so that's something that, it'll be very dissatisfying if we end up with this DVD region lock system for internet commerce where, the people in China transact on Alipay and Tenpay, and, the people in the US and Western Europe transact with credit cards, and the people with, the people in African countries use mobile money systems, and none of them talk to each other. That would suck. And that is something that I think 5 years it won't be solved. We'll be starting to see the way the future will play out, but we will hopefully have made some progress there.
But ultimately, your regulators are going to have to do something about that too, right? Even within the EU, it's deeply complicated right now to transact country by country.
Yeah, they will,
right?
but fundamentally, the solutions we have right now aren't any better. Right now you just have it being more painful to transact. You have, the solutions people are using are kind of half-baked. And so that will be involved in whatever comes next, but fundamentally, more commerce moving online will be a good thing and will be good for consumers.
Absolutely.
The second thing that I think is going to be different in 5 years is the kinds of ways we pay and the kind of things we buy. The UI for payments is looking pretty dated right now. What everyone uses to pay online today is basically a kind of crappy copy of the 1980s mail order form, right? You're there like studiously typing out your credit card details and billing address and whatever, and however annoying that is on a desktop, it's really painful on the phone. And so the UI around how we buy things is going to change. And people talk a lot about Apple Pay, the stuff that Facebook and Twitter have both announced the ability to buy directly in their feeds. And that's clearly going to be a much better purchasing experience because you go from a very cumbersome mobile web checkout process just being able to buy something directly in the app with the credentials you have on file. But that's just like the very narrow point of purchasing changing. I think the bigger change will be the experience of buying changing entirely. And so if you look at, you're probably familiar with Instacart, right? The company that's doing grocery delivery. I think what's interesting about Instacart is it seems kind of obvious in hindsight, the idea that walking around grocery stores is kind of a pain, and no one actually wants to do that. The much better consumer experience is to be able to tap the things on your phone and have them come to you. And you can actually make that more efficient because you're not operating this, this whole edifice in the middle of kind of busy cities and expensive real estate. And so Instacart, really what they did is they rethought the user experience of purchasing and decided that, you don't want to go put items in your cart, push it around, and then drive it home. Like, the real way that this should work is you press a few buttons in an app and it arrives. And you see this in kind of lots of other areas too, where a lot of the innovative startups are rethinking what the purchasing experience for kind of consumers looks like in different verticals. And they can tailor it to each vertical. So one of my favorite startup stories of recent years is a company called Harry's, based out of New York, who are currently giving Gillette a run for their money. And they realized that the current way that just razors and grooming products are brought to market is really inefficient, where they have like these multiple steps of Gillette sells to a distributor, sells to a shop, all the way, and it's marked up at every step of the chain. And so Harry's just came along and they said, one, we're going to do subscriptions, so we just like send stuff into the mail to you, once a month. And two, we're going to sell directly to consumers, so we're going to cut out all those middlemen. Harry's actually owns a razor factory in Germany, which I think is like super legit. And so again, you have them taking advantage of the fact that through the internet, they can directly reach these consumers in a way that wouldn't really have been possible pre the internet and even really pre-mobile devices, and reimagining what the experience of just buying a razor should look like. That reimagining the purchase experience, that's going to be big, and we're seeing like entire industries being uprooted in this vein. We're here in Las Vegas, one of the last holdouts against ride sharing, where most people have acknowledged that the experience of using Lyft or using Uber or using one of these services is much better than taking a taxi.
I think everyone in this room has probably had that traumatic moment where they pulled up Uber or Lyft and realized it wasn't available.
Have people been enjoying taking a taxi?
You're obviously a believer in payments transforming a lot of other industries. What's another adjacent industry that you think will be transformed?
There's a lot of really fun stuff happening in e-commerce right now, and specifically I think even just what e-commerce is, people are still figuring out, because I feel like we have this very outdated picture of e-commerce being, again, the beige Dell desktop in the corner of your living room that you log on once a week, on a Saturday. We have this image of e-commerce from the year 2000 that we haven't really updated. And you can't just narrowly say, e-commerce in the future will be, like e-commerce was before, but on an iPhone. Like, that's pretty uninventive. You have to ask, what can we take advantage of? What are the facts of this new form factor that that are, how can we create commerce experiences that are really native to these new form factors? So two examples of that are, one, Kickstarter, I think, couldn't really happen without social media because, the products themselves tend to be really viral. They have managed to make supporting a project part of your identity, where like the big thing you want to do when you back a project is go like tell your friends and then get them to back it too, such that it actually gets made. And they have, made a commerce company that really is, born of the age of social media and the ability to kind of round up a crowd to help get this thing started. And that is a really exciting trend, and the example of the kind of company that isn't just like, commerce but on a phone. It's just taking advantage of the new format we have and the new kinds of businesses you can make in that. The other is, I think Warby Parker is doing some really interesting stuff. So Warby Parker are sort of reimagining what an e-commerce retailer should be. You can use Warby Parker on your phone, you can use Warby Parker online, but you can also walk into one of their stores in New York. And so what they're doing is they're using their stores basically as kind of showrooms for the glasses, and things work nicely between them, and so you can kind of, go browse the selection of the stores and then buy online and take advantage of the fact that their prices are way lower than traditional retailers. You get all the advantages of an online company, but you're still kind of browsing a brick and mortar store. There are lots of people just playing with what an e-commerce company means. And again, I think I cannot predict in 5 years' time what that'll be. So Stripe is very much a bet on that uncertainty. It's about saying, we are giving these kinds of companies, the Kickstarters and Warby Parkers, we want to give people the tools to be able to create a subscription business or a marketplace or a company that works across every platform. But we can't predict what they're actually going to do with that. And they're the ones who are actually supplying the invention and the innovation.
What do you think is going to happen on the consumer-facing side with authentication at point of sale? Is it going to be fingerprints in a mobile world? Will we see voice? Will we see some kind of photo recognition? What will happen?
Yeah, this one is interesting because there's been a lot of shaking up in the past few years. It feels like there was a time when everyone thought that you would use like a mobile wallet and this would be the way you'd pay for things, like you would use PayPal or your Visa wallet or something like that. And then Apple Pay came along, and I think Apple did, as Apple often tends to do best, is kind of take a set of actually fairly complex software, hardware, a lot of real innovation went into Touch ID and making it work as simply as it did, and made it look really easy. And so, the idea that you pay for something by putting your thumbprint on the sensor, they did a really great job with that. And so I think on mobile, it's pretty clear to us that authentication by the operating system like Apple Pay makes a ton of sense. And so we're going to see more stuff like that. And I think all the people who traditionally got in the way of the customer experience are in trouble. It's going to be the operating system and the merchant, and those are kind of the two parties involved.
Okay. Turning to you guys are known for your simplicity and ease of use, but ultimately started life with a very clunky name that was not as simple as...
Our name was great, thank you.
Right.
Yes.
Tell us that story, and do you think you guys actually would have gained traction had you kept your original name?
So what Alexandra is making fun of me for here is Stripe used to have an equally good name, which is /dev/payments. And it was actually an in-joke, it was a programming joke that this would be your device driver for payments. And it was actually very useful in the early days to get across that the thing we cared about was technical sophistication. The thing we cared about was giving developers a really good experience. After a while, we ran into some issues, the fact that beyond 20 people, no one really got the joke. We ran into the issue that the state of Delaware does not actually allow leading slashes in a company name, and so we had to spell it out. But I think an important thing to realize about startups is that they are path dependent. It's not about getting to the right answer immediately. It's about being the right thing at every step of the way. So my favorite example of this is Microsoft. Microsoft started out building, a basic interpreter for the Altair computer, and it was like a total hobbyist, programming market. They couldn't have started in the they couldn't have started in the enterprise market that they operate in today, because if it was like these two kind of dirty college students out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, no one would have talked to them. So they had to gradually start with the hobbyist programmer market, then make some more language compilers, then make their first operating system, then get into the enterprise software market. And they couldn't have stayed in the compiler market because it was too small, but they had to grow into it along the way. And so I think people often look at the thing that a startup became and think, oh, they should have just, they finally arrived at the right answer and they wasted all this time being earlier versions of themselves, whereas actually a startup is about being the right version of yourself at every step of the way, which is often different as time goes on. And so Stripe had to start as this nerdy, geeky, we really care about the quality of the APIs and kind of programming environment we're giving you for kind of working with money, because no one thought that a payments company could do it at the time. People had given up. And then by the time 3 or 4 years had gone by and people grokked that, okay, I can trust that I will get a good development environment from Stripe, then it was okay that we weren't called /dev payment or /dev /payments anymore.
Even you stumbled on it, right?
Right.
Do you think that Silicon Valley is as accepting of failure as it purports to be?
Silicon Valley is a very accepting place of failure. I feel like we've seen it firsthand where, I know people personally, there are people who work at Stripe who, previously worked on a company, it didn't work out, they went to work in a different company, then maybe they join something, maybe they start something themselves. But I think one of the hardest things to get your mind on in, around startups is that the expected rate of success is very low. You are starting something that in the beginning has a only 10, 20% chance of succeeding, and that should be kind of dispiriting, and that that should be kind of hard. The idea that you're starting out on something that will almost certainly fail. But in the Valley, people have it's kind of part of the culture.
What's your view on remote working? Do you hire the Yahoo question of whether people can work as effectively if they're not in the office? What's your guys' take on it?
So yeah, people get into all these. It feels like religious debates about is remote working the one true solution, and or should everyone be in the one office? And obviously it'll be different for every company, but I think if you are starting a startup today, you have the opportunity to make this call. Will we be a company that supports remote work, or will we be all working centrally out of this one office? And I think you should really seriously have a good answer for not supporting remote work these days, because there is so much phenomenal talent that is available, outside the Bay Area. We at Stripe have a team, we support remote work. We have a team with people working from places as remote as, I'm not making this up, literally the mountains of Ecuador, Anchorage, Alaska, a small island off the coast of Vancouver. They're not just remote, they're really remote. And you can hire all these amazing people who you would not be able to hire otherwise. You have to make that decision early on in a company's life, or early on in a team's life. If you come along to a 400-person company, who are all based in an office down in Mountain View, you can't say, oh, we're actually going to start doing remote, because all the behaviors, all the patterns, all the culture is baked in. In the early days, before those behaviors and patterns and cultures are set up, you have the option to decide, are we going to support remote work? And I think between Slack, between really good video conferencing, there are a lot of pretty compelling I guess you have a lot of help in running a remote company these days. I think you need a pretty good answer to not be doing that.
See, I think The Economist is progressive for letting me work remotely from San Francisco, not Anchorage.
There you go. Maybe you should try Anchorage.
There you go.
It's lovely in the summer.
Not as much tech. One last question for you. To steal a line of questioning actually from Peter Thiel, who asked interview subjects what it is that they believe that's not, that's contrarian, that isn't popularly held. What is that? What do you believe that other people don't?
So one is going back to the discussion we had about kind of global payments earlier. I mean, this is obviously something we spend a lot of time thinking about. But as as very large parts of the world come online very rapidly, I think people assume that naturally payments issues will be solved by everyone just moving to credit cards and that being the one true path. And I guess we very much view it the opposite way, where if you look at a lot of countries, the systems they have are better than credit cards. They have better security properties. You're not giving out your credentials to to the sites you transact on. They're more, they work better on mobile, things like this. And so I think there is a common narrative out there that everyone will be on credit cards in 10 years, and we very much view it the opposite way.
Okay, very interesting. Well, thank you so much. It was really fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.